Sup, bro? So we just got massive patch notes based off the campfire stream that they just did the day before. They did talk about some of the changes there, but the patch notes revealed that there is quite a bit more than what they alluded to in terms of the campfire stream. So we're gonna have to go over from the rogue's perspective and why this matters to you. So I will say overall, these changes are definitely a W for the rogue side of things. But there are some things I definitely want to kind of talk about that might have been missed initially. In terms of skills is concerned, we have Heartseeker and Forceful. I'll kind of put these two together. Forceful and Heartseeker, which are the bow basic attacks, both of them are getting attack speed increases 20%. Basically makes it so the bow basic attacks are attacking closer to the rate that Puncture has been attacking, and that's kind of been the more big appeal for wanting to go Puncture over some of the bow basic attacks for some setups, and also in the past too as well. The other thing that probably isn't as understood is the power interrupt frames from 20 to 16. This is probably my favorite part of these two. Every skill has a certain amount of animation frames that they have to go through when you attack, and you can't cancel up until a certain point. So for Forceful and Heartseeker, it was 20 frames. So now dropping the threshold from 20 to 16 means that you can interrupt the animation 4 frames earlier than you were able to do before, making both of these skills feel more fluid whenever you're using both of these basic attacks. So if you're an avid stutter step or someone who likes to, kind of move pretty efficiently or quickly after attacking with a particular skill, this is a pretty big deal for you. It's going to feel considerably better alongside with the attack speed increase. So both Heartseeker and Forceful Arrows should definitely see more play coming into the future. So now we go to Flurry, and initially they showed just the 10% on the campfire stream, and we were kind of just saying, is that it? Just 10%? Because Flurry kind of needs a little bit more than that. More later on this, but they started off with the 10% boost in damage for Flurry. If we go on to improve Flurry and advanced Flurry, they gave some additional functionalities. For improved Flurry, basically now Flurry will deal 20% more damage to vulnerable enemies. So that's a pretty nice buff to kind of have for just marking enemies vulnerable, which is very easy to do with Flurry. And so now with the advanced Flurry, we now get a 30% increased damage on the next Flurry after you evade through an enemy. So not only do you get the stun, but you also get the damage bonus too as well. So both of these are actually pretty good buffs, and the route that you go will just really depend on your play style with Flurry. Both of them are good. It's just kind of more so up to you there. Rapid Fire got a 10% damage increase. I'm not quite sure why. Not complaining. Love Rapid Fire. One of my favorite builds to play. So I'm all for it. So yeah, 10% increased damage. Sure, take it. Rain of Arrows, 10% increased damage to here as well. I assume the reason why they did both of these at 10% here is I think they're probably trying to get us to do more Rain of Arrows type gameplay, and usually Rapid Fire and Rain of Arrows is usually a good pairing for precision builds. So I think that's probably why they did this. And so if so, it's a W, no complaints there. Next up is Precision. They did a pretty decent buff for Precision from 6 to 4. It's nice considering that there's been issues with Precision in terms of how we get our buffs. Whenever we critically strike, there's a delay in our stacks, and so it can sometimes not give us the correct amount of stacks when we want them, and we're not able to consume Precision when we think we should be able to, which kind of leads to us having to shoot 4 or 5 basic attacks just to kind of make sure that the stat counter kind of keeps up. So it's a little clunky. And so with them reducing it from 6 to 4, it's still a little clunky, but at least you can go back to your 3-to-1 ratio of attacks for combo points to make sure that you definitely do get your precision bonus or consume your precision. So that's a buff overall. What's not probably really thought about or talked about much here is that this is actually a pretty massive buff for inner sight and precision builds, because before you basically were able to consume precision every 4th cast of a spam core skill, where now it's going to be every 3rd cast. And so that's more damage for inner sight builds or preparation builds, but it's also better for resources too as well, because if you're running a Scout Hunter, every third attack you're getting, you know, you're getting resources back. That is a pretty big deal when it comes to spamming things, because that means you need less resource management, which means that you can probably opt for more offensive things. So this is probably a bigger W for those type of things than it is for combo points, but overall it's a good buff for both and in general, and just good quality of life. We have next the infusion glyph. The cooldown reduction increased from 0.5 seconds to 1 second. I don't know if this will have me use infusion more often. We'll kind of wait and see. Here is the rest of Flurry's buffs from earlier. You know how we mentioned Flurry up here. So this is the rest of Flurry's buffs here, and this is encircling blades. They increased the damage from 8 to 15 to 15 to 22%. So this is quite a nice buff here. This is big enough to now actually want to consider putting this on a two-hander, because before we would just put it on like maybe, you know, a one-hander, a jury slot, maybe an amulet, maybe that's still kind of pushing it. But now this is a big enough buff that we would get some decent value out of putting it on a two-hander now. So Flurry's got some pretty nice stonks here. If you like playing Flurry, this is definitely the time to do that now. Branching volleys, this is one of my favorite updates here. It got a massive buff to its aspect. For those who don't know, branching volleys used to be terrible. It was the worst supporting core skill aspect in the Rogue Arsenal by far. In fact, I wouldn't even recommend it on any of the max roll builds. I would never use it myself. It was just really, really bad. So it went from being the worst to now being literally the best supporting aspect for a core skill that rogues have. Generally speaking, most of the time we'll probably be running Scout Hunter with most precision builds. So this would probably go on an amulet. And if it's on an amulet, we have basically Barrage dealing 120%. This ricochet is going to deal 120% of the value of the original Barrage arrow, which is absolutely nuts, because before it was only 40% and it didn't really do much of anything. But now the back arrows or the ricochets are going to be doing the majority of your damage, because now it's going to split in two and have a 90% chance on an amulet to split in two, which is basically every time. So you're going to have all these different arrows up, you know, between 24 to 30 arrows, depending if you're doing cunning, stratagem, legendary node or not. And then those back arrows are dealing 120% of your normal damage. That's just insane for Barrage. Like, this is absolutely on the borderline broken of an aspect in terms of just actual damage. So this is going to skyrocket Barrage's value in general in terms of just being able to just clear, probably being one of the best rogue clears core skills now with this particular aspect. So its single target still remains the same because they didn't buff the initial part of it, but its AoE clearing is far better than what it was. So now leveling with Barrage is even better. Just doing speed runs and stuff like that's gonna be even better. This is gonna be great for Gauntlet, of course, because, you know, it's gonna one-shot everything, a bunch of arrows everywhere. And a couple of things to mention because of this branching volleys update is that because these arrows are now so strong, the ricochets are now so strong, and you get so many arrows, you can actually start flirting with more physical route. I know that a lot of players don't really like doing imbuement based builds. Barrage is probably going to be the one skill where you probably can get away with doing physical and not feel like you're being gimped for doing so, just because you have enough arrows that just deals a lot of damage that you can go with physical and not have to worry about having to use shadow imbuement all the time just to be able to clear pretty well. So I've always thought Barrage was good. This just takes it to a whole new level. So excited for that. Shadow Slicer, they increased the damage here. This is pretty much irrelevant. I would just ignore this. Reason being is because the shadow clones already are kind of bugged and don't receive most of the damage buffs that it's supposed to. So when you increase the damage, the base damage to 200 to 300% of, well, pretty much crap, you're still going to end up with crap. So this is kind of a useless update here. Eaglehorn kind of in the same boat. The problem isn't the damage here. It's just the way, it's just the actual affix in general. It's just not useful. You can increase it to 80% to 100%. It's still going to be bad. At least they made an attempt, but we're still not going to use it. Eyes of the Dark. same ordeal. Now that we have the vampiric powers, and metamorphosis is going to be a thing for a lot of builds. You're going to see more to boss will more often. So this is probably not the patch to sit there and want to do a buff to Eyes of the Dark for an additive buff at that, right? We're not going to use that. Band of Trickery is actually an interesting one. They did reduce the cooldown to 10 seconds from 12, and the Shadow Decoy damage increased by 20%. This one's probably a sleeper in terms of Band of Trickery in general, so the buffs are actually pretty nice. But the Shadow itself can one-shot a pack of trash in World Tier 4. And that may not seem like, I'll say, well, everything can be one-shot in World Tier 4 in the open world. But when you think about the Gauntlet, you can actually just set down like a poison trap, let everything get pulled into the poison trap. The Shadow clone just blows up everything. Now it's a little bit stronger. It just blows up everything. All the trash just dies, and you can keep moving and continue to deal damage. So I actually think for the Gauntlet, this is probably a sleeper, because it's really not about how much damage you do, but how efficiently you do your damage. And if the Shadow Decoy is able to still one shot in the Gauntlet, this is something to look forward to going forward. But yeah. Coming down the gameplay, they did end up fixing the weapon mastery bug. Also, precision itself was doing more damage than I guess it was supposed to. They're fixing that too as well. How big of a nerf is that is to be determined. I don't really think it's really that big of a deal. I will say that the weapon mastery one is a pretty big, hefty hit. Although beforehand, we were still one-shotting most things anyway, so the only thing that changes is that our numbers are not as pretty if you were using the bug, of course. So, but yeah. And last but not least, we're going to talk about the vampiric powers real quick. I'm going to ignore Accursed Touch and Blood Boiling as a rogue. However, the other four are actually pretty nice and pretty good. Moonrise itself will pretty much replace anything that has rapid or accelerating in mostly the max roll builds, simply just because you get attack speed and you get movement speed, and movement speed is, well, good. Faster you can move through things, more efficient you are playing. So Moonrise is going to definitely get some play here. Undying, this kind of just depends. This is a very, very good sustain way to heal. So for those who like that, it's here. I think for most min-maxers are probably not going to bother with this. They're just really good with just slamming potions usually. But it's there if you need it, if you want. Hectic is a big sleeper. I don't hear many people talking about Hectic, but Hectic is absolutely godly now. Keep in mind, back with the vampiric powers in season 2, Hectic basically only reduced cooldown by 2 seconds, and it was actually pretty good when it was just 2 seconds, but now it's buffed to 4 seconds. So actually you can reduce your cooldowns, a random cooldown, by 4 seconds after casting 5 basic attack skills. That is a massive utility there. So you're gonna want to find a way to do this if you're doing a combo point based build, and this is actually good enough to even be able to like kind of permanently start casting some skills. If you can get rid of some cooldowns on your bar, you can go like one imbuement builds, like you can permanently do cold imbuement or permanently do poison imbuement without bursting venoms and things, if you're clever enough to do that. So this is going to open up some really cool opportunities. I'm going to use it. I think it's really, really cool. And then of course, Metamorphosis. This is going to be very popular. It was very popular in season 2. So getting an unstoppable for 2.5 seconds after using it is going to feel good for a lot of players who don't like being crowd controlled. The downfall for Metamorphosis is that it increases the evade cooldown by 5 to 10 seconds. So I think this is a fair trade-off. However, I think it's going to be quite interesting what we're going to do with Metamorphosis, because most builds nowadays tend to use Juggernaut for the easy capping of your armor. We won't need it as much for Gauntlet, obviously, but just in general farming for different content, Juggernaut is still kind of popular. So Juggernaut also increases your evade cooldown. Metamorphosis now also increases your evade cooldown. So you're gonna have a hell of a long cooldown on evade if you run buff. So it's gonna be kind of tricky to see how we incorporate Metamorphosis into current builds that we are used to seeing for the most part. I will also say too that Metamorphosis also makes easy access to boss will now. So if some builds didn't use to boss will because, well, it was going to be hard to kind of proc that for the average player, now we have an easy way to do that, to get 7.5 seconds buff for to boss will. So you'll see this, even if it is mainly just to proc to boss will and give us that buff there, an easy way to do that. So I'm excited. These changes are actually pretty awesome. I'm gonna be playing Barrage a lot. I've been playing a lot of Barrage in the recent in general, just because it doesn't get much representation. I kind of want to show it off, but now Barrage is just gonna be nuts. Same thing with Flurry. I'm happy with the Flurry buff. It's definitely going to be worth playing now versus what it was before. Super excited about that. Look for some new guys on Max Roll, or new changes on Max Roll when it comes to these builds. Look for a new Barrage video guide coming from me pretty soon after the patch releases. And other than that, let me know what you think down in the comments. And as always, till next time.